All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Thursday, August 29th, 2019, and of course, all eyes remain locked on Hurricane Dorian as it moves away from the Eastern Caribbean and towards the east coast of Florida for this Labor Day holiday weekend. So, looking at this storm here today, guys, apologize for the late update. I not only had some stuff to do around here, I live in Jacksonville, if you don't know, so we're kind of getting ready for this thing. I live kind of on a farm with animals and all kinds of stuff to worry about. So for us, these things take a little bit of preparation. And I also had a 11, 12-minute video recorded and the software crashed. So we're going to try this again from the top. So Hurricane Dorian on the GOES 16 satellite imagery here this afternoon. What are we looking at? Well, thankfully, in the short term, we're looking at the fact that this Dorian has not really strengthened much since last night. It has pretty much held its intensity since it left Puerto Rico. It was getting really impressive right around the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, and then it's kind of stumbled on its travels since. This is due to two things. One, being a finger of dry air, that's kind of wrapped up into the system, which is continuing to put a little bit of dry air into that core, which keeps kind of choking off the thunderstorms. You look at the center of the circulation here, you see those dark, like colors, almost blacks will appear, and then they'll pulse and they'll wane, they'll pulse and they'll wane. That's because that dry air is just enough to kind of irritate these thunderstorms and not allow them to develop too strong. You see the colors keep changing, and there's no definite ring structure yet. That's because Dorian's still having a hard time. The other problem Dorian has, it has limited outflow, limited exhaust. Although it appears to be proving at the end of the satellite imagery, you see these little frilly clouds right here. If we go back a few frames, we can see that these clouds almost don't exist right here. And this tells us that there's something to Dorian's west, which in this case is an upper level low that it's kind of running into, and the air at the top of the cyclone can't vent away from it. You can see the air venting over here, and you would see it off of the satellite image that's cut off at the top here in this quadrant where it has some outflow exhaust, but it doesn't have it in the rest of the storm. And that's because the upper levels are very crowded right now. The upper level low that was supposed to move away from Dorian didn't. So it's kind of hanging out. And you have an upper level high that's steering Dorian right now, and that's also blocking off. So the only divergence a lot the system has is pretty much right here. So until Dorian gets a little bit better environment, a little less crowded upper level environment, it's still going to kind of have these struggles for the short term. However, according to the National Hurricane Center's 11 a.m. forecast advisory, Dorian is expected to become a major hurricane by tomorrow morning with 115-mile-an-hour sustained winds, making it a Category 3 on the Saffir-Simpson scale. And within by the weekend, by 72 hours from now, which would put us in Saturday-Sunday timeframe, they believe that Dorian will intensify into a Category 4 hurricane and hold that intensity through landfall. So a Category 4 hurricane is still forecast to impact Florida this weekend, guys, and that is a big deal. I mean, you're talking about Category 3 to Category 4. The last Category 3, the last major hurricane to hit the east coast of Florida was Hurricane Gene in 2004. It has been more than 15 years since something like this happened. And if we're talking about Category 4, that goes back even further. I'd have to look up the last one. It might have been Andrew, as far as a Category 4 or higher. So it's been a while since the east coast of Florida took something like this on the nose. But regardless of, that is the current intensity forecast. I think that's in pretty good agreement. I think that Dorian will find a better environment as it gets into Friday, Saturday, Sunday timeframe. And in this section of the forecast period, I think that intensification is very likely. It'll be more measured for now. This early Friday morning, Category 3, maybe we won't see that until like Friday night, Saturday morning. But I still think that at some point Dorian will really begin to look like an impressive hurricane and will be an impressive hurricane as it approaches Florida. Let's go ahead and talk about track a little bit, guys. So we're talking about the latest forecast track. The National Hurricane Center's track does still bring the system on shore somewhere around central South Florida. This is somewhere north of West Palm Beach on this track, but I encourage you to look carefully at the track. Notice how these days are numbered: 8 a.m. Sunday, 8 a.m. Monday, 8 a.m. Tuesday. The system is slowing down on this forecast period, and this is one of the things we're watching very carefully today is the slowdown that we're kind of getting a little further down the forecast road. We're starting to realize, and our computer models are starting to try to tell us that Dorian could slow down significantly as it approaches or gets onshore of Florida. And although an outright stall may not be likely, the system is going to slow down quite significantly. If anyone remembers Hurricane Francis in 2004 in this region, part of that four hurricane assault in 2004, Francis parked over the state damn near for 2 or 3 days and brought a tropical storm to virtually every county of the peninsula for multiple days, which caused a lot of damage, as you can imagine. And the situation with Dorian is still very possible. This timing slowdown is becoming concerning, and we're looking at that because we do believe the steering flows that are bringing Dorian along may begin to collapse. So this is kind of the forecast theory, guys. This is what we're talking about with Dorian. I'm going to back up the European model here. I'm going to use the European. It's our more consistent models, and it's been more consistent with Dorian, although it lies to the south of kind of the consensus forecast track, and it's south of the National Hurricane Center's track. So this is just an illustration purpose of mostly what we're talking about in terms of weather. So we're looking at a 500 millibar chart. This is about halfway up in the atmosphere. This is the chart we like to use when we're talking about steering tropical systems, especially well-developed ones like Dorian. So on this map, we have high pressures and we have low pressures, basically. So all these domes of high pressure in orange are, like I said, they're domes of high pressure. They rotate clockwise. There's one over the Atlantic and there's one over the Four Corners region. And then we have little old Dorian here moving towards Florida. So what you're going to see is this high pressure is going to build this way. The high is going to begin to extend towards Florida and towards the East Coast going into the next few days. This Atlantic high pressure will build as this trough of low pressure begins to exit. So we're going to go ahead. We're looking at late this afternoon's forecast. So we're going to look at tomorrow after, or looking at late Friday afternoon's forecast. Notice how that high that was here has now extended, and the new edge of the high pretty much is all the way into parts of Georgia in the southeast. Okay, so this new blocking high pressure, Dorian is not going to want to pass this line. Dorian wants to move away from this line. It's kind of like a magnet. Think about it like this. Think about this as a positive, and this is a positive, or a negative and a negative. I know it doesn't make sense because it's high and low, but just for the sake of the illustration, think of it as two magnets repelling each other. Okay, except this magnet is gigantic and this magnet is tiny for our illustration. So Dorian is going to get kind of repelled away from this high pressure while it's also being steered by the clockwise flow around the high pressure. Okay, so it wants to start turning west. Okay, this is Friday afternoon, Friday evening. So we're going to go into Saturday evening now. Notice how the storm one has slowed down some. But two, this high pressure remains very strong on the European model. Now, this is dependent. If this high pressure is weaker, say it's more like this, the further away this high pressure, this line in the sand is drawn, whether it's here, 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 tells us how far Dorian gets to creep north. If it's real strong like this model, this is the southerly solution. This is what pushes Dorian further south. If the high pressure is more weak like this, let's say, then Dorian will find avenues to turn further north. This is why the Carolinas are not completely off the hook yet, but it would be further down the road if that were to happen. Going into Sunday evening, we do see the storm has begun to approach, but the high is beginning to move away. Earlier in that last model run, it was here, and now it's starting to move backwards. It's starting to break down as our next trough begins to move in and break down the edge of that high pressure. As that does, Dorian will begin to feel a weakness in steering flow, and although it still kind of moves towards the coast, we're now talking about a situation where Dorian either outright stops or slows way down. But eventually, there's a break here. There's a high pressure to its east and to its west with a trough in the middle. Dorian's going to want to try to follow that weakness. It's going to want to try to follow that break in the high pressures and move along with it. But how strong this trough is to tug him is what the important thing is. What we see here, this is Tuesday evening. The storm, according to the European model, is still somewhere in central Florida. The storm has moved about this far in 2 or 3 days. So we're looking at a potential for a serious situation where Dorian could just outright stall along the coast of Florida or somewhere inland on Florida. And going into Thursday, as the high pressures re-intensify, it looks like Dorian will find a break between them and be able to escape going in towards later next week. But that is kind of the forecast theory, guys. Basically, how fast that high pressure builds, how strong the high pressure is, and how strong Dorian is will tell us whether we have, a system that pushes real far south into Florida and then maybe turns into the Panhandle, or if it's weaker and kind of just comes up the coast, or even if it has these more northerly tracks where it gets weaker faster and it comes in towards Jacksonville, comes in towards Savannah, or comes in towards, like Daytona Beach. Those options, of course, are still on the table as well. We can see this in our kind of spaghetti plots, although most of the hurricane models are drawing in again on that south central Florida landfall somewhere south of Cape Canaveral. I do believe this is probably the most likely scenario, but again, is it fast and gets on shore and turns? Is it a weak turn that just kind of goes like this, or is the turn sooner and it brings it closer to the coast? I mean, this thing could pull a Floyd. It could come right to the coast and just turn back away. If that high pressure is real weak and real far away, and then that next trough is stronger. I mean, there are scenarios where this thing just kind of just trolls everybody. I mean, the solutions can't be off the table yet. And since everything is kind of slowing down, we're putting where we thought our forecast window was going to be kind of ending as far as landfall goes Sunday, Monday. Now we're thinking, okay, maybe it could be Tuesday. Well, then that pushes the whole forecast back a day, which means we're still in that 5 day gray area that we were in yesterday, if that makes sense. So I know it's frustrating. I know it's so annoying to be able to say I don't know. Trust me, nobody knows that more than me. I mean, I get all these questions. I'm supposed to be the guy that can answer them, and I feel like I can't. But it's not responsible for me to lie to you or just make some silly gut feeling that has no basis in reality, because the reality is we do believe that we're pretty confident in the next few days of how it's going to move. But then when we get to here, those weaknesses in the steering flow could present some definite forecast challenges. It's a little early to talk specific impacts. I'm going to hold off until we know more about the track and the final intensity. But this is something I wanted to bring up. This is the European model. This is the super secret stuff. So you didn't get this from me. Don't worry about it. But what we have here is a European model's forecast map. And remember how we saw the European model had this thing slowing down and slowly moving up the middle of the coast. The rainfall totals coming in could be pretty impressive. We're talking about isolated areas up to 2 feet of rain along that inner eye where the eye comes ashore, but several areas, Jacksonville getting a foot of rain, South Georgia getting 13, 14 inches of rain, 4, 5, 6, 7 inches, a foot in Central Florida and like Ocala. So if this system is to stall, the rainfall forecast will jump significantly, and we will have a not maybe a Harvey or Florence type flooding situation, but those sort of situations where the storm stalls and dumps a whole lot of rain, that is on the table. For now, guys, the bottom line, everyone needs to be ready for Dorian. Everyone from, I would say, Pascagoula, Gulf Coast region eastward, and the Carolinas need to still be watching. I would say for you guys, if this thing does come towards you, it's going to be way later. It's going to be later next week. It's going to be a slower storm, and you're going to have way more time to watch it. For now, you're not completely off the hook, but you are looking better. Although, look out for impacts this week as Dorian does eventually it's going to make its way back towards you somehow. It will be a rainmaker when it does. But at the situations where it maybe stalls off the coast and come towards y'all, would definitely be something to watch as well. But in that case, it would be slowing way down, and the timing would be in the middle to end of next week if it were to do that. So that's what I got for you guys this afternoon. Anywhere in Florida, guys, be preparing. Don't be running for the hills. Don't pack your car and just drive somewhere to get away from it. You don't know where it's going to go yet. But be ready. Just be ready. Do your common sense things around the house. Get some extra groceries. Get some extra supplies. Fill your car up and just wait this one out and see where it's going to go, because it's going to be strong. Someone's going to get a significant hurricane. It just matters exactly who and when, and we're not going to know that for a little bit longer. We can't drill this thing down much more yet. But Florida, this is probably our storm. I mean, I'm just going to say this is probably our storm, but not every solution is on off the table yet. So keep watching it, guys. We'll have more throughout the afternoon. If you got any questions, please let me know. As always, thanks for watching and have a good one.